Hello, welcome to another episode of the Intel with Greg Cosell on the Inside the Birds platform. I'm Jeff Mosher alongside my co-host Adam Kaplan, and with us, as always, is Greg Cosell to deliver the intel in this one as we continue our breakdowns of college prospects for the NFL draft, which is getting very close. This one's all about quarterbacks, the most important position in the game. And you might be thinking, hey, my team doesn't need a quarterback, especially if you're an Eagles fan. We're not going to draft one in the first round. Why would I care about these quarterback breakdowns? And I'm going to stop and say, well, 2 years ago, when we were breaking down Kenny Pickett out of Pitt, nobody expected he'd be on the Eagles 2 years later. So these breakdowns are important, not just for now, but the next year and the next year. And the great thing about our content, Greg, is that people can and have gone back and checked out your breakdowns when it's applicable. So here we have a situation. We'll go through about a dozen college draft eligible college quarterbacks, and you'll break it down. And we look forward to it. This is always one of my favorite episodes.
Well, you guys are both on social media, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
Well, it seems to me that everybody's got all this figured out. So, I mean, there's probably nothing to discuss.
Did they ever figure it out? Really?
Absolutely right. We'll just do like mean tweets. We'll read out tweets.
Exactly.
We'll call them expert tweets. And
everybody's got it figured out. So, there's really nothing to say.
I would say this group, Greg, I don't want to call them polarizing. It's fascinating and I know the three of us talk to coaches and front office people. It's really interesting to get the sort of dichotomy of opinions here. And I know you've got yours based strictly on tape. So let's get started with Caleb Williams, who should go number one to the Bears, but I know you've broken down a state.
Yeah, isn't that the only visit he made to the Bears?
They got time, by the way. They've got time till the week before the draft.
Okay. I mean, Williams is a really interesting guy because I would say that he's certainly a high-level prospect. I think one of the things that really stands out in a really positive way when you watch Caleb Williams is he has, and this is absolutely critical, by the way, he has a really good ability to control the ball and place it where he wants to place it. And that can't be overstated because when all's said and done, you can get into so many different traits with quarterbacks, but if you can't throw it and place it where you want to, then you really don't have very much at all. So he does have really precise ball location. He controls the ball really well. And as you guys know, we all talk to people. I mean, I sit and grind away watching tape. So I form my own, I don't want to say it's an opinion, but my own sense of what these quarterbacks are. But ball placement for pretty much every coach would be a non-negotiable. Wouldn't you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Location. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, ball placement and ball location, accuracy, whatever term you want to use, that's a non-negotiable when it comes to quarterback evaluation. And I think that that's something that really does stand out with Caleb Williams. Now, I think one thing that needs to be said just in general is there's so many variables when you evaluate a college quarterback, particularly playing in a system that is not likely to be anything like he's going to play in the league for the most part. There's just so many variables and there's no, it's not a mathematical equation. It's now, where does he go? How does he get coached? I mean, we're all assuming he's going to Chicago. Let's put that aside for a moment because we're going to talk about a bunch of quarterbacks. Where does he go? What is the system? How is he going to be coached? What is he going to be asked to do? What is his understanding of the offense? How much are they going to give him that he needs to really be able to execute on a week-to-week basis? Does he have some kind of understanding of the defenses that he's going to play against? There's so many factors that go into whether a quarterback succeeds or not early in his career. Now, getting back to Williams, I would say that what he's really, really good at as well is he has great spatial awareness. He can calmly and effectively kind of navigate chaos, and he can function very intelligently and athletically at game speed to do that. One thing you didn't see a ton of, and I'm not going to sit here and say he can't do it. Certainly it's there on tape. It just wasn't the overriding thing, is you didn't necessarily see him executing what we would call meaningful NFL pass game concepts where he had to make a lot of timing window throws versus zone coverage. Now, just so people understand, dropping back on 3 steps and throwing a hitch to an open receiver where people say, well, here, that's timing. Yeah, it is. but anybody could do that. You know, any quarterback can do that. That's not really what I'm talking about. So there's a lot to like about Caleb Williams. He'll have to learn some things at the NFL level that he doesn't really know. And in all honesty, I thought that it was a tough offense to watch, particularly on third down, the USC offense. I'm not sure that there were a lot of great opportunities for him. And I think that's one reason why he had to move so much, is I don't think he felt like he had a lot of good places to throw the football that were clean. So we'll see, but he's certainly a really good prospect.
So, Greg, the one thing that a coach who graded him and why he had Jayden Daniels over Williams in his grading is that he said there was just too many plays where he was relying on off-schedule throws. You didn't see a lot of pocket, which transfers to the next level. And so that's got a real problem when you're talking about a guy who coaches the quarterback position, who's got to work with quarterbacks to the next level, because you're looking for these throws on tape and you go, wow, I don't see a lot of pocket stuff. Was that a concern for you?
Yeah, I'm going to read something I typed in my transition. Okay. Williams is both an exhilarating and frustrating combination of elite playmaking traits with flashes of high-level pocket play and a loose, at times reckless feel to his game with too much movement and unrefined pocket mechanics and fundamentals. So I would agree with that, Coach. You know, I think that there's questions. I don't want to say they're concerns because maybe he can do it, but there are questions. There's things you don't see enough of. Now, that's why I wanted to make the point about the nature of their pass game, is I think he may have felt, without being in his head, that there just weren't a lot of clean throws, particularly in sort of those high leverage, critical third down situations. But there's no question that his game and his greatest strength was his quote unquote playmaking ability. And we'll see how that goes. You know, look, people start comparing quarterbacks to Patrick Mahomes, and that comparison has been made. I will say this, and Mahomes is special. We know that. And to use an educational term, I don't think you can major in Mahomes. I don't think you can compare people to Mahomes. He's just a different cat. You know, you can't start thinking that's the way you want quarterbacks to be taught and to play. So you have to be careful, I think, about comparing players to Patrick Mahomes.
Greg, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb will be, once he's picked number one overall, the third guy to come out of the Lincoln Riley system to go number one overall. Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, I think, also?
That would be correct.
Okay, Mayfield might have been there for the last days of Stoops, but I think Riley was the OC or the quarterbacks guy at the time. So I guess what I'm wondering, all three of these guys are kind of known for getting out of the pocket in a good way, but Baker, also go ahead.
Not Baker so much, Jeff. I mean, I remember watching Baker Mayfield in college, and because I'm not necessarily sitting at home studying college football, I watch it and have it on Saturdays after I work a bit. And when I started watching Baker's tape, I was actually surprised at how much of a pocket player he was, because I was under the impression that he was a movement guy.
Right.
And Baker, while he's not a statue, is certainly not a playmaker. Baker was much more of a pocket quarterback at Oklahoma.
Than he is now, because we've talked about him now. He seems kind of skittish if he has to hang around the pocket too long.
That's different. That's a different thing.
That's what I was getting at, the skittishness, because Murray's could be skittish in the pocket as well and want to get out.
But Murray has dynamic movement ability. Baker does not.
Of course. And I was just going to ask if anything about the offense you think is structured as such, or if it's just three guys.
That's a hard thing for me to know, because I certainly am not there, and I don't know how all that's taught, and I don't know all the nuances and details of that offense.
Right.
But you know, Murray is a dynamic playmaker. Williams can make special plays, but he's not a special athlete, certainly the way Kyler Murray is.
Right. Right. And of course, Jalen Hurts played in that system too. And we talked about him and getting in and staying in the pocket at times.
And Jalen is not, I think we would all agree, Jalen is a big, powerful runner, but Jalen is probably, you know, he's not at the level of special when it comes to movement. I mean, he's certainly a good mover and can make plays on the move, but he's more of a big, physical, competitive runner than he is a shifty, elusive Zuzu type runner.
Yeah, correct. All right, good stuff. Let us move on from Caleb Williams. Adam mentioned Jayden Daniels from LSU. We'll talk about Drake Maye, North Carolina. There seems to be sort of depending on what kind of moves are made in the draft, kind of like the whole chocolate or vanilla. What do you like there? What's your flavor? Strawberry? Anything like that? When you compare these two guys, why don't you give a breakdown there on both those guys?
Well, we'll start with Jayden Daniels. I remember watching him last summer. and really liking his 2022 tape and thinking, God, if this guy continues to improve, he's going to be, a high pick. And he did continue to improve. Now, his best trait, certainly when you go back to, let's say 2022, was his explosive running ability, both by design and through second reaction movement. But yet, as he's grown and grown, there's a relatively refined passer with really solid fundamentals and mechanics that's there. I mean, he's got an innate willingness to work from the pocket. He's got a sense of patience. He's a progression reader. He does not just leave the pocket. He has gotten better and better and better every year. I mean, his pocket command has improved significantly with experience. He's got that desirable combination of pocket efficiency and playmaking explosiveness. I wouldn't say he's got a sudden twitchy arm. The ball doesn't explode out of his hands. There are some examples on tape of deeper throws that lose a little energy on the back end. But overall, I think he can make the necessary throws within the structured context of the passing game. And there's a calmness and poise to the way in which he plays. And that's always something you really want to see with a quarterback. He's a very fluid guy in everything he does. Everything looks easy. He's just a fluid mover. I think he's a high-level quarterback prospect. He can be patient. He can be efficient from the pocket, particularly on the first two levels of the defense. And then he's got that dynamic playmaking ability because he can run now. I mean, he's got speed. He can run by the defense. And like I said, you love the fact that he's continued to improve. And from what I hear, he's a great kid. So, he's a really good prospect.
And what one coach told me that was at the pro day, and I think this team worked him out. Certainly spent a lot of time with him privately. Is that why people criticize his body frame? Maybe being a little slight. Nothing close to Bryce Young's. He said don't even put them in the same categories in terms of frame. He goes, I had no problem with the way that he's built. And LSU's got a good program, but he goes, at our level, we could get these guys built better. And he goes, there's no problem seeing them up close.
He's also 6'4". I mean, there's a big difference there. I mean, so again, you don't want him running and taking hits, and he'll have to learn that because in college he took some big hits, and you certainly don't want that. But he is 6'4". He's not 5'11" or 5'10".
Right. He's under 210, which is a little slight, I think, for that position.
Yeah. I believe I remember that being somewhat of a question mark for personnel people on Marcus Mariota coming out of Oregon. Wasn't he a little bit slight, but also very fast, obviously, and good enough arm, right? Because he was 6'4", I think he was under 215 coming out of college. He may have put some weight on, or under 220. But you like him. Okay. I've heard him being described, Greg, as a little bit of a reckless runner in the open field. Is that something? Yeah. A
little bit. I mean, he takes too many hits. I think he's going to have to learn that. And you'd expect him to learn that. But he is very dynamic. I mean, this guy, he has great speed. He's just, again, we don't have, I guess he never ran a 40 or any, I don't think he did. Did he run a 40?
I'm not sure what he did as pro day. I know he got measured and teams. I don't know what he did as pro day.
Yeah, but I mean, he you don't really need to know that. It's like Worthy, running the 4.21. We knew he was fast. Daniels is fast.
Got it. Let's move on to Drake Maye. Very polarizing. He's one of those guys. This happens every year where there's a guy who is going to be a top 5 pick. Then all of a sudden he gets bashed, and then the draft comes around. He winds up being a top 5 pick.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people now, what I keep hearing, and I don't know what this means. I mean, I do and I don't. I'm hearing people say things like, well, he's all over the place. Okay. I mean, you could argue from a traits perspective. Now, this Drake Maye is a really good example of how do different evaluators do their jobs and how do they start? Like if you talk to a coach, okay, how do you start when you look at a guy? And I'm not talking about whether they start by watching his third down plays or what are they looking for when they watch a quarterback? And so now we get into traits and attributes. So that's what I think a lot of guys start with, and then they work from that. Because clearly, if they don't feel the guy has the necessary traits and attributes to play at a high level in the National Football League, you wouldn't think about drafting him, certainly not high. Mm-hmm. You could easily make the argument that in terms of just pure physical traits and athletic traits, that Maye is the best of this entire group. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that he's the best prospect. That is a different part of the equation. But you have a guy that has size, arm strength, for the most part, ball placement. We'll get into that in a minute. He's a good athlete. He moves well. I think that for the most part, he played with a pretty natural sense of poise and composure. He worked through progressions. I thought he trusted the route concepts and the combinations and his protection. A very important point. A lot of young quarterbacks do not trust protection and they leave the pocket early. I never felt watching him that he was a hurried or frenetic kind of player. He can make outstanding throws. There's throws that are throughout his tape from both 2022 and 2023 that are big time NFL throws. Now, there are some flaws in his game, clearly. One thing that he needs to work on, number one, is he has a tendency, and this needs to be cleaned up. Can it be? It can be. You never know. He has a tendency to drift in the pocket to his left when there's no pressure and no reason to move. And when you do that, you create your own pressure because your O-line is pass protecting based on you dropping back, as we say, staying on the midline, and he drifts. As I said, that can be coached, but it needs to be cleaned up. I would say that there were times where he didn't see things as cleanly as you would like, and he left some throws on the field. I would say, too, that he needs to become a little more precise with his ball location. That to me is something that did stand out and that needs to be cleaned up. We've seen quarterbacks get better with their ball location. I think overall, each part of his game needs to improve a little bit, including his reading, his ball location. I mentioned the drifting, but it's all there in his body. It's all there. So now the question is, and this is when you get into the variables, guys, where's he going to go? Who's going to coach him? What's the offensive system? What's the rest of the team look like? Does he go to a team where if he has to put up 30 every week just to compete? You never want your young quarterback to be in that situation. So there's 10 different variables that determine, not just for Drake Maye, by the way, but for every young quarterback coming out. And I think we have to be careful about talking about these quarterbacks as if they're finished products. I mean, we've seen Trevor Lawrence now play 3 years in the NFL, okay? He was talked about as being generational. No knock on Trevor Lawrence, but Trevor Lawrence still has a ways to go. That's the way it is sometimes. I think because of what somebody like C.J. Stroud did a year ago, there's this sense that if you don't do that, you're no good. And, and keep in mind, C.J. Stroud was not everybody's number one on their board last year. So, you have to understand that there's so many variables that factor in to the equation. And as you guys have said, for whatever reason, Drake Maye seems to be the poster child now for just ripping a quarterback as if this guy can't play.
I had a coach tell me that if you just looked at traits and his ability, you can make the case, and Caleb Williams is just a category based on the style of play. But he said, look, Maye to me has got the most upside. And I was like, well, go over the traits. He listed several. Yeah. He loved his game. He goes, look, he needs to be cleaned up. But coaches who want to coach quarterbacks want guys like this because they're willing to take on a guy that's not a clean prospect in terms of mechanics and decision making. And you just talked about the drifting. As you said, this stuff could be cleaned up, but they also need time to develop these guys.
Yeah, he was also coached by Clyde Christensen this past year at North Carolina. Okay. And Clyde Christensen coached in the NFL for 30 plus years, and he coached Andrew Luck, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning.
Clyde,
Clyde has a sense of how to coach quarterbacks, and which again doesn't mean that Drake Maye is any more ready than anybody else. We don't know the answer to that, but I think we have to understand that this is still a process. And could Drake Maye come in and because he's an aggressive thrower and is a playmaker in his mind, if he were the starter wherever he went, could he throw 20 picks? Sure, he could. That doesn't automatically mean he would never be a good player. It could be a process. It's always a process to some degree. But I agree, Adam. It's interesting what you said about who you spoke to. And I started by saying that you could easily say Drake Maye has the best traits of any quarterback in this draft class, which again doesn't mean he'll be the best, but we don't know.
Some of the way you're describing him with the athletic traits, the arm, some things that need to be refined. I feel, I know we hate this game, but it almost sounds sort of Carson Wentz coming out of college-ish. Athletic, strong arm, good build, needed to clean up some mechanics. Had, an amazing year. Obviously had a pretty good rookie year too, but is there anything not
I don't know if
apples,
I
is
can
that
fair
fair?
them in the way exactly the way you are, but I
Mhm.
understand what you're saying. And by the way, after even though Wentz got hurt in 2017, after that season, there was a sense that Wentz was on his way to being a top 3 quarterback in the league
Yeah,
by
of
everybody,
course.
not just you and the three of us
Sure.
talking.
Yeah, people
Sure.
forget. People
Yeah,
they see the end game and they go, "No way,"
yeah.
but he
So I
was.
mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
there's
why I said
probably
coming out of, I wanted
yeah,
to keep it to like coming out of college.
and
Yeah.
there's probably
sure.
20 reasons why that didn't happen. We don't need to talk about that,
Right.
but Drake Maye is, and he's supposed to be a great kid. Again, I don't know him. None of us know him personally, but I did introduce myself to him at the combine. He's a big kid now. I mean, he's that, which by the way, that's a trait. 6'4", 225 is a trait.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want him 5'10" and 190. Yes, no doubt. Let's move on to the guy who's the most polarizing, and we'll leave the rumors aside; those don't matter. What does the tape tell you and show you about J.J. McCarthy?
JJ McCarthy's a fascinating guy because, in all honesty, and I'm going to talk to more people about him because sometimes when I hear people I really respect say things that I totally did not see, I feel like, okay, am I missing something?
Right.
But I don't think his tape was really good. Now, we have to put aside the success of the team because you can always find that in college football. Maybe some people remember 2015, Alabama won the national championship with Jake Coker. Now, I didn't hear anybody talking about Jake Coker when he came out saying, man, this guy is a winner. This guy, should be a top pick in the draft, because that part doesn't mean anything. You have to look at what the player is, because you know what? He's not going to, if he's drafted high, and he may well be, he's not likely to go to a team that has the best offensive line in the NFL, that has 2 running backs that are big time in college football, that had a defense that had, 9 guys or so that were at the combine. That's not going to happen. So all that stuff that allowed Michigan to be, they were undefeated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that allowed Michigan to be undefeated. That's not going to exist in the NFL. He did not have to play. He could, let's put it this way, he could play a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get back into the discussion of traits. The film, as far as him throwing the ball, was not great. He was a guy that labored a bit to drive the ball. Okay, the ball did not jump out of his hand with natural velocity. He had to work to throw it hard. I would say that he missed a lot of routine throws. Okay. And keep in mind, I worked this year on the matchup show with 2 guys who played quarterback in college. And when you drop back and there's no one in front of you and you're totally clean in the pocket and you throw a dig ball at 18 yards that's right in front of you to a wide open receiver, any quarterback could do that. High school kids can do that. So, again, he may turn out to be really, really good. The tape was not great. Now, what he does have is he does move really well. He does have excellent, above the X and O ability. He can run and gain yards. He can throw on the move effectively. I would say that there's a patience to his game that you like. He's not a guy who forces throws. Of course, he wasn't in many games where he had to make throws. I would say one thing you really want to see, which you did not see in college hardly ever, just because of the quality of the O-line and the fact that he didn't have to drop back 40 times, was you didn't see him play in really muddied and noisy pockets with people around him. Now, can you find a few plays like that? You absolutely can. No question. So can he do it? Yes, it's there, but he rarely had to do it. And in the NFL, he will have to do it far more often, honestly. So, I'm really, like I said, would I be surprised if he became a quality starter down the road, given kind of the way in which he played? I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think the tape says top 5 pick, but he could well be.
That's really fascinating. I mean, I think I love the Coker reference. You think of Stetson Bennett, who wins 2 championships at Georgia. What is he, a 4th round pick of the
Yeah,
Rams?
I mean,
Right? Like,
you have to
yeah.
discard that. You see, the people who say he's a winner, that's lazy talk. And again, maybe he'll be phenomenal. Again, as I said, I'm telling you what the film shows, and maybe there'll be improvement, and maybe he'll get coached great, and maybe there's 2 tweaks in his fundamentals that a coach who's way smarter than I am makes, and all of a sudden he's a better player. All these things factor in, but the fact that they were 15-0 is not really relevant to this conversation at all.
Right.
Yeah, and one thing I would add before we move on here, it's kind of what you're saying, and I know coaches like this, but you don't really see it because you weren't asked to do it. At some point, you have to carry your football team if you want to be a college starter. It's hard to find a time, and it's not his fault, where he to put the team on his back and throw to win a game. You just don't see a lot of that, and that's because you want to see adversity also, which is very important to coaches, quarterback coaches in general. They want to see when it's on you, can you do it? Not really has to do that very much, if at all, at Michigan.
And by the way, the quarterbacks that had to do that, they're not going to succeed 100% of the time. That's the thing.
Right.
Caleb Williams had to do that, and he didn't succeed 100% of the time. Drake Maye had to do that. He did not succeed 100% of the time. Quite frankly, I don't know if McCarthy had to do it at all this year.
None.
No. So, so we'll see. I think that there are things to like about him, clearly. I've heard great things about the kid, but all I'm saying is I don't think the tape says top 5 pick, but we know that that's irrelevant. He could well be a top 5 pick.
Great. Good. Let's move on we'll talk about 2 quarterbacks who I feel are linked. They obviously played against each other in the Pac-12 championship game. Nix of Oregon and Michael Penix of Washington. Both of them had sort of winding college careers that started off one place and ended up somewhere else, but they finished off with nice senior seasons. And Greg, this is another one where I feel like different teams may look at those guys differently based on their own scheme. But let's break down Nix and Michael Penix.
Well, let's start with Nix. And I had the opportunity to do something with Nix, and he was super impressive talking football. Super impressive. Clearly an incredibly smart kid, was asked to do a lot in the offense. I asked him if he set the protections. He said yes. That is a critical thing as you move to the NFL, the ability to set protections. And to me, what really stood out with Nix is there was a decisiveness to his game and an efficiency to his game. He was an executor. He was a ball distributor. Now, people say, well, the offense was really well schemed. Well, isn't that what coaches try to do in the NFL too? I mean, I don't think a coach in the NFL says, let's have a crappy scheme and just run out and, we're going to run you out there and see what happens. I mean, I don't think that in and of itself is a negative with a quarterback. You want to have a good scheme and you want your quarterback to execute it at a high level. That's what Nix did. I don't think he has a big arm by any means, but it's good enough. He's a very comfortable player. He executed the pass game. He's an easy thrower. He made the right kind of throw to the right receiver at the right time, even though he doesn't have a power arm. Will that be an issue for some? Perhaps. I wouldn't say he can drive the ball with big time velocity, so that will be a discussion. But he was really, really efficient. And keep in mind, guys, I believe he had 4 or 5 different offensive coordinators in his college career. And that speaks to just the kid and his understanding. And like I said, I spent a half hour, 35 minutes doing something with him where we broke down plays. He was unbelievable. He knew everything. So I would imagine that's the way he came across in interviews. I don't know if you guys heard anything about that.
Yeah, everybody likes him. The comparison I got, it wasn't in so much of arm strength and size or whatever, but what he projects to be is sort of like an Andy Dalton type, not quite what you're looking for 100%, but a lot of good traits. And the coach that I spoke with gave him a 2nd round grade, Nix, and he said he'll go top 40. Could he go in the 1st round? Sure, because the league needs quarterbacks.
Right.
But he didn't love him like maybe some other people did.
And I could see that, by the way, no question, because overall, you'd say that the arm is not quite exactly what you want. So yes, I mean, in Andy Dalton, he was
second, right?
Second round pick. And I mean, Andy Dalton
Had some pretty good years, by the way, with the
he
Bengals.
would have been the MVP one year when he broke his finger or his hand week
Mhm.
13 or week 14. So he's had a nice career. And then Adam's correct. Dalton wasn't exactly what you want, but you could line up and play with him for sure. And I know people say, well, he didn't win playoff games, but they also made the playoffs something like 6 or 7 years in a row. So, and once you get in the playoffs, there's so many variables. But I could see that comparison. But Bo Nix he's going to play in the league and he's going to start somewhere. And by the way, having said that, I don't mean that that's going to happen week 1 in the NFL season. If he's drafted 39th, it's not likely to be the case, but it's going to happen somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And how about, let's talk about Penix, a guy who loves to throw the ball deep. I think that stands out about him.
Penix is a fascinating guy. I got to meet and talk to him as well, and he's a pretty impressive kid too, by the way. And I talked to him a little bit about his offense and how he was taught his offense. And, these kids, they're pretty sharp. I would say that there's no question based on his 2022 and 2023 tape that he's the best intermediate and deep ball passer in this draft class. I mean, he's got a strong arm. I think people found out how strong it is even more so through the draft process now. He can drive the ball with velocity. For the most part, he's precise with his ball location on the more difficult downfield throws. I'll tell you what I liked about him, and this will be seen as a positive and as a negative. He's very accountable to the system with his drops and his sets and his timing and his rhythm, playing to and within the structure of the design passing game. He can work through progressions with clarity, decisiveness. I thought he understood defensive structures. The issue for him is the movement. And just because he ran fast in the 40, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Can he make throws on the move? I thought he lost a lot of his ball location on the move. I thought he became frenetic's too strong a word, but he was not a comfortable player having to make throws on the move. So again, that's going to be an issue for some people. I would say that while his ball location overall, even from the pocket, was plus, there were some times where the accuracy was unbelievably great, and other times he just had some scratch your head, can't believe it misses that you couldn't believe. So I think he'll need to be protected really well. I think you need an offensive line to work from the middle out. In other words, center to guards. They control the depth of the pocket, and I think you need that with Michael Penix. But he is an aggressive thrower. I would bet some people will be bothered by his delivery. I don't know if you guys have heard that. It's at times almost looks sidearm. It makes it appear as if he's 5'10". But this kid can throw the football.
Yeah, I think that the thing, Greg, that some coaches I spoke with, they get concerned about this. It wasn't a concern 10 years ago. How the quarterback position has changed a little bit. There's certain things you want a guy to be able to do on the move, and I just get the feel like, and now the injuries aside, injuries are pretty significant. That's a concern. The right ACL, which has been repaired twice. But just looking at the tape, guys I've spoken with, they love the kid, they love the arm strength, but off schedule. Maybe he wasn't asked to do that. But maybe, again, 10 years ago, this was not, people want to just pocket passers, which he clearly is. So you wonder off schedule, and you were talking about that delivery is kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's very odd. So that's got to be cleaned up. So that he's got some things he's got to clean up.
It makes it tougher for him to make kind of off-platform throws, which is not his game.
Adam, what did he officially measure at as far as height? Because Greg made a great point to his throwing style. I even talked to him at the Senior Bowl, and I didn't feel like I was talking to somebody that was 6'3" or 6'4".
He's 6'2". He's 6'2".
Ah, that's what he officially measured at. Okay, 6'2". Yeah, that seemed more like it. Which is listen. I mean, you can be a quarterback at
6'2" and a quarter, 216. Yeah. Big hands, which you like.
But I totally agree. There are times you watch him play, and his motion makes him look like he's a shorter quarterback, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But he's a really interesting guy. I mean, the lazy comparison, because he's left-handed, is Tua. and there's no comparison whatsoever. I mean,
Penix could spin it.
Penix
drive
it much better than Tua.
Yeah.
That's a lazy comparison.
Yeah.
We won't make that or the Michael Vick comparison either because he's left-handed.
Yeah. Right.
Let's go to the backup group.
Speaking of a guy who can spin it.
Yeah, exactly. Vic. Like we've seen in practice, like we've probably never seen since. Guys 6 feet could drive at 60 yards just easily. But let's look at the backup group who's some upside. Rattler, Spencer Rattler from South Carolina, Michael Pratt, Jordan Travis, and we're only going to talk about Joe Milton because of the arm strength. I know he's going to go way later, but let's focus on Rattler, Pratt, and Travis if you can.
Well, Rattler is a fascinating guy because Rattler is a really gifted thrower of the football. Some may remember that when he came out of high school in Arizona, he was the #1 recruited quarterback in the country. But he's really gifted. He's got higher level arm talent. He can effortlessly make throws at all levels. He's got the easy strength to drive the ball with velocity when demanded. There were many examples of him making throws that transition really well to the next level. He showed subtle pocket movement. He worked through progressions. Don't forget, at South Carolina this past year, Dowell Loggins was his OC. Dowell Loggins is an NFL offensive coordinator, been in the league with several teams. So, the issue when you watch his tape this year, and I can understand it because he's still a human being, is their O-line at South Carolina was really, really bad. And so he started to get into that flinch mode in the pocket. And that's a natural reaction. That's hard to correct sometimes. But it was such a bad O-line that you can understand it. I mean, I guarantee he just anticipated pressure and he probably just started to perceive pressure. It's a human reaction. But this kid is, again, not knowing the kid, I know he's supposedly has grown up. There were people who spoke about him 2-3 years ago as if, his personality and character were an issue. I'm just telling you what I've heard. I don't know him personally. I hear it's much better in that regard. He could be an interesting guy, Adam. In other words, he could be a starter down the road because he's got the talent to be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, look, Kirk Cousins was the 4th-round pick. He needed a little bit of luck, but because Rattler's projected to go 3rd or 4th round. And now he's not a biggest guy, just over 6 feet. But when you could throw it like he can, I didn't think he threw the ball all that well at the Senior Bowl, but I know his tape is pretty good. That's interesting. I didn't quite realize how bad his offensive line was. And you worry about that because if we've seen this over the years when it's in a guy's head at quarterback, he's worried about his offensive line. He starts dropping his eyes. You don't want that.
No, and then he just and you flinch. You expect that you're going to be under pressure literally when you hit your back foot, which he was a lot, by the way.
So let's also talk about the kid from Tulane, Michael Pratt. So a lot of people like Michael Pratt.
He's a great kid. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I know him as well. He's a great kid. Pratt's an interesting guy because when you talk about traits, you'd probably say that there's nothing that really stands out at a higher level physically or athletically. Like he's not a guy you go, wow. Now, so therefore you watch him play and you don't hang your hat on one specific thing, where you say, wow, that is definitely going to translate and that's going to make him a starting quarterback. His arm strength is probably slightly better than average in terms of velocity. His ball placement was good, but missed some throws that he should make. He's a good athlete, not a special athlete. You wouldn't call him a play creator or a playmaker. I would say that there were times, and I watched his tape, a lot of his tape. I don't know, it just worked out that way. I would say there were times he clearly showed a subtle and refined sense of timing and anticipation with really good eyes and vision, understanding safety structure, rotation, knew where to go with the football. Could you line up and play with him as a starter? Sure. You would need, a good run game. You need a good O-line. You need a defense that keeps it close. You'd need him to be in a situation where he doesn't, in a sense, what you said earlier, Jeff, where he doesn't have to go out and win the game by himself. And by the way, there's not 32 quarterbacks starting in the NFL who can go out and win games by themselves.
I'm not sure there's 22.
Yeah, we need to understand that too, that there's not 10 transcendent quarterbacks. There's just not. So, sometimes you got to line up and you play and, you You want your quarterback to be efficient, not make mistakes, be part of a complete offense, multidimensional, have a defense that allows you to play the way you want to play for 4 quarters. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. You know, there's not 20 Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think I have the right play here. I was talking to a coach who, I believe it's Pratt, who said that he played in I guess he had a bunch of different play callers going back to high school.
Yep.
And he thinks that that's impacted him. It's hard. He said going back to the sophomore year, that's the last time he had the same play caller 2 years in a row. I believe that's Pratt. Almost certain of it.
Yeah, and he's played a lot of football. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, you know. So he's a 40-year starter with 44 starts in college football.
That means a lot. I mean,
he played a lot of football.
Yeah.
He's seen a lot of things. You know, he's a really smart kid. You know, he's one of those guys you want in your quarterback room. You know, and like he would definitely not be a first-year starter. He won't be drafted as that, clearly. But you know, again, I don't want to compare him to Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins throws the ball better. But Kirk Cousins was drafted in the 4th round, didn't start early, you know, had started in Washington, maybe 3rd year, give or take. I maybe you guys remember better than I do. And then all of a sudden, you know, his career started to take off. You know, could I see Pratt in a similar mode? Yeah, like I said, he's not as good a thrower as Cousins, but that's the kind of career. If he were to become everything that he could become, it would have to be that kind of ascension.
Moving on to Jordan Travis, Greg, coming off an injury, but I know some coaches they like the kid. They've met with him. You know, he's come off an injury, but there's some ability there.
Yeah, Jordan Travis. I mean, his tape's pretty interesting. I mean, I'm going to be really curious to see where he gets drafted. I mean, obviously he played this year. It's not like he didn't play this year. You know, I mean, he's got a pretty quick delivery. It's compact. There's no wasted motion. I thought there were dropbacks in which he read coverage. He delivered with timing, precise ball placement. He made good throws between the numbers, made some excellent layering throws. That's not easy to do for a lot of college quarterbacks. You know, we know that when he's healthy, that he's got great movement ability. I mean, this guy is an outstanding runner. He can give the quarterback, give an offense the quarterback run game, and that helps dictate defensive alignments. He certainly has second reaction playmaking ability. He's an interesting guy. You know, to me, he wasn't truly a natural thrower, but he's a really interesting guy.
Could be one of those late round, you know, you get him in the right system, healthy and everything, sit behind the right quarterback, and you have something there. Let's finish it off with the guy who everybody liked to watch at the combine, Greg. They call it the Underwear Olympics for a reason, right? He threw the ball 70 yards with the ease, the flick of the wrist, and that's Tennessee's Joe Milton.
Hey, Brian Jaworski told me he went through a ball 82 yards. So, you know, there's probably a lot of guys that can, not a lot, but there are guys who can do it. Look, this guy's going to be polarizing for many different reasons. You know, obviously he can throw a football. But let's get into it in a little more detail. He ran one of the purest versions of the air raid passing game in college football. So what does that mean? It means there's an emphasis on no huddle, fast tempo, wide spread formations, pure progression reads, where a quarterback is not really taught to understand the subtleties and nuances of defenses and coverages. A high percentage of the throws are, to use a term I think people understand, are predetermined. He's not necessarily reading as he drops back. So now, what does Milton have to do when he gets to the NFL? He's not only going to have to be introduced and learn NFL passing concepts and progressions, but he's also going to see defensive fronts and coverage structures that'll be brand new to him. So besides the fact that he's very erratic with his ball location, he has to start from scratch. So he is clearly a project. Now, again, having said that, who knows what happens 3 years down the road? No one knows that. But that's where it'll be with Joe Milton. That's how he has to start.
Right. And guys who have traits always wind up, you know, they'll be in a camp because they have unbelievable traits.
Yeah, he'll be drafted.
He'll be drafted.
I mean, this guy can throw. I mean, here's some questions. Now we get into the physical part. Can he throw with the needed anticipation and timing that is necessary? we don't know that. He didn't really have to do that a lot.
You know, it's funny, Greg, at the combine, a coach told me he was standing with a bunch of quarterback coaches and he goes, why is he slowing down his drop? It was kind of weird. He just, because he wanted to show off his arm strength. He wanted to go through the process. It was kind of funny, but Jeff and I were at the Senior Bowl and we had heard about it, you know, his elite arm strength, but the problem that he has, Greg, his accuracy is so off.
Yeah.
You can't miss wide open guys.
No.
You just can't. And that happened repeatedly at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, no, and that showed up on tape too. And plus he just didn't see things the way you need to see things because that's not the way he's been taught.
Right.
So now he has to learn that from scratch.
Right. Excellent stuff. That's about a dozen quarterbacks there that we look forward to seeing getting into these teams, getting into the draft. I think pretty much all of them will be drafted that we talk about. It just depends on where they go and who they go to. So that is it for quarterbacks. So we've done pass catchers, we've done quarterbacks, we've done edge rushers, we've done linemen. We will finish this off in the next one looking at defensive backs as well as we get ready for the NFL draft. That's going to do it. So for Greg Cosell and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. You've been watching The Intel with Greg Cosell.